This one I'm really excited about. You know, obviously as a real estate agent, right, I see so many different sides to the business, right? But, you know, being that we target homeowners, prospective homeowners, right, this to me is really exciting because I think we're going to dig into a part of those transactions that people never see, right? The only part they see, we were talking about, is when you're sitting down at the table and we put on the big show, right? And everybody signs the documents and goes home happy, right? So with that, you know, I kind of jumped into it without any introduction. We are joined today by Kim Stepanuk with MBH Settlement Group, and I am very excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks for having
Kim.
me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Welcome to the show.
I think what we tend to do, and if Gus doesn't want to do this, he'll throw something at me, and that's fine. But I think what we tend to do is start off really asking about you and who are you and how did you get to MBH and how did you become a title attorney? Give us all the gossip on Kim.
Great. As David mentioned, my name is Kim Stepanuk. I work at MBH Settlement Group. I also have my own law firm, Stepanuk Law Group. I'm a licensed attorney in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, currently managing MBH Settlement Group's Maryland business, especially our main office in Maryland out of Bethesda. So before I became a real estate attorney, I went to University of Baltimore for law school. Prior to that, Virginia Tech. But what really got me interested in real estate is before entering the real estate field, I used to be a divorce litigator. So I did a lot of courtroom cases, high conflict, contract disputes, custody matters, alimony cases. So
But those were fun.
I bet.
they have their own challenges, but I think we all learn from each experience that we have. Yeah. So it's easy for me now to deal with people who are celebrating the experience. Everyone in a real estate transaction is moving towards the same goal. Once they're under contract, and that's usually when we find out about the transaction, right. Buyers, sellers, everyone, all the agents, all the parties, the loan officers and the lenders want to move towards settlement. So it's a more collaborative experience, which I really enjoy. And I like being at the end of the road at the settlement table with them, celebrating with them. So like I said, my background is in litigation. So I think what I can really bring to the table is helping people realize how every step along the way is important. And if you make even one misstep, where you can be down the road. So it helps keep everyone focused on the same track and, like I said, on the same goal.
So you mentioned like the celebratory thing, right? Mm-hmm. What about the more, I guess for lack of better words, challenging transactions, right? Like somebody, you know, buyers and sellers have the same goals, but I think that there are times where the way they get there are oftentimes very different.
Right.
Right. And so then you wind up having this conflict at what's supposed to otherwise be this really cool type of situation. Tell us about that a little bit.
Every transaction has its own hurdles to overcome, but by the time people have entered into a contract, hopefully the process has been explained to them and what's going to happen moving forward with good agents. And that's why it's important to have good people on your team. But once they've signed that contract, it's a legally binding document, and we're just moving the train forward. We're helping everyone get to that end goal, but there are significant legal ramifications to be in breach or default of a contract. And so we can assist people with making sure that they are moving forward towards that goal. And I know it's not an easy process for everyone. Oftentimes people sell real estate as a result of a death in a family or a divorce or parting ways, or even just difficult life decisions, moving across the country for a spouse's job. So we understand that it's not always celebratory, but I do think it's checking off the box and closing that chapter to start a new chapter.
I could never do that.
No.
I love helping people buy and sell,
Yep.
but that side of things. You know, it's crazy. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a lawyer.
Did you?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
And I realized how much school I was going to have to go to.
Yeah.
That was the end of that.
Obviously, Kim, you're so good at what you do. Why did you choose that field?
So, like I said, my background is in divorce litigation and high conflict litigation. So,
I guess my question is, when you were a kid, did you think you were going to do that? Was that your dream?
Life has kind of come full circle for me because when I was at Virginia Tech, I was studying business and political science, and I actually did not want to graduate in 3 years. So I was kind of just looking for another field to enter into to give me one more year of schooling because I just wasn't prepared to leave that fourth year.
You weren't ready to be a grown-up yet, right?
I needed to buy myself a little bit more time. So I found a different major, public and urban affairs, which is just regional planning, so zoning regulations. So I studied that for a year, and then before I went to law school, I was trying to decide, should I go into the master's route or should I try law school? I thought with law school, I would have more options if it wasn't actually something that I enjoyed doing. So I went to law school. I went through all 3 years of law school. I worked for the federal government. I worked for different law firms, and then I thought before I graduate, I should probably check out a courtroom, even though I never ever thought I would do litigation.
Right.
So went and clerked for a judge, loved it, and ended up litigating for 8 years. We had some family changes, had a baby. My husband, he does litigation as well. Just looking for a different challenge. And one thing that I really enjoyed about the family law was making sure people, even when you're going through tough times, you're aligned with a new vision, that next chapter we've been talking about. Right. How do you set yourself up for the future in a good financial way to make sure you find that financial success? You can listen to Gus's other podcast about why it makes sense financially in terms of investing and for your long-term goals of purchasing a house rather than renting a house. But it's nice to feel that people are set up and you are helping them move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have a very busy life, which is awesome. You work for MBH Settlement Group. You also have your own firm with your husband.
Correct.
You guys have a baby. Your husband is also an attorney. How do you balance all this?
It's definitely challenging, but I think prioritizing the goals, work always comes first for us. And I believe in work-life integration. Yeah. So not necessarily having a strict 8 to 5. There's some days where I have to leave early and pick up my daughter in Columbia by 5. So, if I leave at 4, but that means the work doesn't stop, right? But that aligns with most of the people that we assist, loan officers who are helping real estate agents on weekends, and that flexibility does allow us to best serve the people, our partners that we work with.
Yeah,
it's so interesting that she said that, right? Work-life integration, is that how you put that, right? Because a lot of people, they talk about work-life balance, right? They go to work, but they want all of this, extra time for free time or whatever it is. And it's interesting that you said that, because I feel like that's kind of how we live our lives, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're always working, but always finding
life-work balance.
Life-work-balance, yeah. That's crazy.
Or in my case, life balance.
Or in your case, work balance.
More like it.
No doubt about it.
Yeah,
I like it.
That's great.
What are some of the things that people should be aware of, right? Again, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this, people get to the settlement table. We all sit down. We have this big party, right? It's this big celebratory thing. What are some of the things that are going on behind the scenes that maybe a buyer or seller don't even know is taking place until, maybe ever, or maybe unless there's a problem, for example?
Right. At MBH, and part of the role of a title attorney is threefold. One, to make sure we're clearing title. So we do our due diligence. We pull title records usually for the last 60 to 40 years, and we review those documents to make sure there's no issues. No one wants to purchase a house and then find out that there's a $40,000 tax lien on the property.
No doubt.
And that can definitely happen when people are transferring properties between family members without actually going through the sale of an actual sale.
Right.
So one thing, like I said, we're pulling the land records, we're looking for judgments, we are looking at the case search history, we're looking for bankruptcy filings, anything that could cause a cloud on a title. So those are the
Sounds exhausting.
So those are one of the things that we're looking for immediately when we get a file. We request a title search, and then we review those documents to make sure we can clear all the issues. And if we know it's a short turnaround time, someone's closing in 5 to 7 days, we're doing it in a very quick manner. If someone has a 30 to 45 day close, it's a little bit more of a drawn out process and less expedited, but we're aligning with the schedule of the contract. The second thing we do is we're essentially a financial intermediary. So the lender will send us funds if they're funding the transaction. The buyers will bring funds to the settlement table or wire them in advance. And if sellers need money to close the transaction, meaning there's judgments or liens that they need to cover before they can actually transfer the property, they're sending it to us too. And that's where we look at those settlement statements that are so important in our transaction. We are making sure that all of the money comes to us, and then we disperse to the proper agencies. So we're sending money to the county for taxes, usually recordation and transfer taxes. We're paying the HOAs. We're clearing water bills. We're making sure that all of those issues that we've identified in the title search are resolved. And then the third piece of what we do is making sure the buyers receive the title that they believe they're receiving. Clean and clear title, no judgments, liens, encumbrances, zoning violations, anything like that, but also how they want to take title. And there's a few ways, of course, that you can take title. You could own a property in your sole name, just one owner. You could own it as joint tenants, meaning you own it with another individual or 5 other individuals, however many ever people are purchasing in. And joint tenants in Maryland comes with the right of survivorship. So if David, Gus, and I were all owning a property, 3 of us as joint tenants, and
Let's
I
do
would
it.
and
Let's
I
make
would
it
pass
happen.
away, my share would automatically go to David and Gus.
Split equally automatically?
Split equally automatically.
Okay, nice.
It's called by operation of law, meaning you would literally need to do nothing.
Wow.
And it would vest in you in that way in your title. You can also own property as tenants in common. So if David owns 1/3, Gus owns 1/3, I own 1/3, I pass away and we own it as tenants in common, my share passes to my heirs. So it would pass probably to my spouse. There's a right of succession
Sure.
depending on if you have kids or if you have a surviving spouse, but to my spouse or kids.
So in that situation, I'm going to go off on a tangent here for half a second. Let's say you own a third, I own a third, Gus, you own a third. You could sell your third without even having to talk to us in that type of a
Exactly.
scenario, right?
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
So if I wanted to sell it to the guy that owns the ice cream shop down the street, you would then be owners with the ice cream guy down the street, and without your consent. So that's important to consider when you are structuring property deals.
What kind of
like
ice cream
that.
is he selling? I'm just,
I know, right? Like,
Maybe you want to be in business with him, or
I'm
maybe
just
you
saying.
don't. But it's important that when you enter into that contract, you understand the long-term ramifications.
Right.
You are going to be owning property, and depending on how you own that title, you may be subject to some of the liens or the tax judgments of other people that you're entering into that business relationship with. And then, of course, you can also own property as tenants by the entirety, meaning you would own it as a married couple. The nice thing about tenants by the entirety, it has the utmost protection, and it means everything except for tax liens, if there was a lien against my husband, it wouldn't necessarily attach to our property as long as at the time of settlement we could certify that we were continuously married for the duration of the ownership period. So it's important to talk to an attorney or work with your settlement company to make sure you are taking title the best possible way for you.
right.
God, that's so involved, right?
Ooh.
Like we could
Thank
probably have
God
a
for there are
whole
people like
podcast
you,
just
Kim.
for that. Like,
I'm serious.
Holy
So
cow.
I want to go back real quick to HOAs, right?
Okay.
Because we deal with them quite a bit.
Yep.
So hypothetically, if we do work on a home that has HOA, but we don't get approval, or the homeowner decides not to go through the HOA approval process and they just went ahead because, it's their house, their mortgage, they make the payment, the HOA don't make the mortgage payment, because we get quite a bit of that, believe it or not. And we advise them not to go that route and to actually go ahead and fill out an HOA, architectural, what do you call it?
it's usually like an architectural guideline form
yeah.
or like a property improvement
Yeah.
form or something like
Right.
that. Yeah.
But some of them just don't want to do that. So, and then unfortunately, they find out the hard way that the HOA puts a lien on the property and they can't sell it, right? And so, can we talk a little bit about that? How does that work, and how can they take that lien off the property to sell it?
So if it's gotten to the point where a lien has actually been placed on the property, that's something that we're noticing during the title search, and we do have to clear that lien. So if it's a $5,000 penalty, either we have to pay it from the seller's proceeds. So if the sellers were going to receive $100,000 and it's $5,000 we have to pay off, then we pay it off as part of the transaction because we're so confident in the title that we're providing. We're going to issue that title insurance, which we can talk about more later, but
Yeah.
that insurance means that the person is receiving marketable, clean and clear title at settlement.
So they can remove the lien without reversing the work, essentially, right?
It depends on exactly what comes up in the HOA documents, but as part of the transaction, the sellers are required to provide documents to the buyers about exactly what those violations
Like,
entail.
an example, like if they replace their front door, they put a purple door on and it's not allowed by the HOA.
Right. And so it just depends whether it's gotten to an actual lien process, because as David will tell you more, in those disclosures, it will say, there's a purple door and that's not consistent with the rules and regulations
Right.
of our HOA. And, you haven't cut your grass and the light bulbs or the light fixtures on the front of your house don't match consistent with our regulations. Please fix those items. And so if they're not
Gotcha.
fixed in advance of settlement, then it ultimately becomes the buyer's problem.
Sure.
And then the buyer is now in violation of the HOA rules. And a lot of times the HOA doesn't find out about these violations until you go to transfer the property, because the
Right.
HOA in most areas is not driving around in a golf cart trying to find these violations.
I don't know. I've
Some-
seen some HOAs, Kim.
some-
I was going to say, unless
and
you're in
some they
Montgomery
are.
Village.
And definitely, and some they are. But a lot of times the issues aren't identified until there's a walk around at the time of settlement, because we have to request the HOA information, a statement of the account. So as soon as we request that, it notifies the HOA that the property's under contract.
Yeah.
And that's usually when they're going to send someone out to make sure it's in compliance, because this is one of the last opportunities they have to fix it before it's sold, and one of the last, ability to make sure that it's fixed. But if it's an issue where there's unpaid HOA, or the HOA has identified based on their rules and regulations that there's a fine associated with it, for every month that they have not cut their grass, there's a $150 penalty, anything like that, they would take the matter to court, obtain a judgment against that homeowner, and then if it's recorded, you can record it in the local land records. If it's a circuit court judgment, we'll automatically create a lien on the property. But those are the financial issues that we're trying to resolve, just like a tax lien, HOAs, monetary judgments. If you're in a car accident, someone obtains a judgment against you that wasn't satisfied by your insurance.
Yeah.
All of those would be judgments or liens we would have to pay off in addition to any deed of trust, so a mortgage or a home equity line. All of those are items we're looking for to make sure they're fully satisfied, so that the buyer can feel confident that they're receiving that clean and clear title.
Let's talk about that purple door for a second, right? The violation is noted, right? The HOA goes out with their clipboard and they do their walk around. They note this violation.
Right.
Does the buyer have to move forward with the purchase if the seller doesn't fix that? Is that?
It just depends on what your contract term states. So whether you're using different contracts, however your contract is set up will dictate whether the obligations of the sellers to make those changes in advance.
She's gonna have me go back and read, man.
I'm telling you.
I'm gonna have to read some contracts. I mean, I thought I knew the contracts, right? But
I don't know how you do it.
Oftentimes, the real resolution, again, we're all moving towards the same goal of going towards settlement. So what is the actual cost of making the repairs? And usually it's not a significant cost. If it's just a matter of changing a purple door to black or tan or navy.
we're talking a coat of paint. Right?
Exactly. Right. All of us can run out to the store, and as professionals in the field, sometimes the agents are literally out there painting it themselves, right?
That's
Who do I make the check out to? Right?
Sometimes the sellers are doing it. But, and most people don't want the deal to fall through. They're so close to settlement. They've lined up their movers. So it's just a matter of how can we move forward. So usually there's a satisfactory resolution that everyone can get on board with.
And these are all of the things you don't see, right? These are all of the things that are being dealt with that unless it becomes like a real unsolvable problem, I guess.
So much that goes on behind the scenes.
Unbelievable.
Including that spackling job you did on your drywall the other day.
I got to sand that down. And I told my wife, I said, I don't think I can find this color. What color do you want our bathroom? And I might actually paint the bathroom, right? It's not pink. It's like a beige or something. My kids want pink. I don't think that's
Of course they do.
Pink bathroom. Maybe yellow, right? A yellow bathroom, right? Is that?
No. What are you, 60?
I mean, I feel like I am sometimes. What color should I paint my... We're getting way off top. What color should I paint my bathroom?
Go like light gray. It's
White.
trendy.
White?
Yeah. Or
White? Really?
Well, what other colors do you have in there?
blue.
In the bathroom? It's all one color, and then I've got some, like white trim or whatever. Right?
Yeah. Baseboards. Yeah.
But what color is your pedestal and toilet?
White.
And
White. It's
bath?
all white.
Okay, and then add a little color, a little
I
gray.
mean, I don't want it to be white walls. I'm gonna look like a hospital, right? Like
Just go light gray. You can't go wrong with that.
I got to get spousal approval.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, what I want.
It's not your decision.
Doesn't really
you don't matter. Yeah. No,
That's not the first time I've heard this today.
It's all good.
Anyway, so let me ask you this, right? Now that we've talked about my bathroom for some reason. In the state of Maryland, I mean, obviously everything's negotiable, right? But just as a baseline, right? In the state of Maryland, the buyer has the right to choose the company that they want to provide their title services, right? Couple of questions in there. One, why is that? Why does the buyer, by default get to choose? And two, when they do that, obviously there's attorneys involved in that. Who does that? Who do you? The attorneys, who do you represent in those scenarios?
So the buyer always has the right in most jurisdictions to pick the title company because they're also purchasing title insurance for the most part.
That makes sense.
So just like if you were to shop around and get car insurance, you as the automobile operator would have the right to choose whether you want to use Geico, Allstate. There's always an absolute right of the consumer to pick their insurance company. And that's how title insurance works as well.
Can I jump in there for a second? And this is all this great information, right? does the cost change for title insurance from company to company? Like if I were to go to you versus, 123 Title, is the title insurance going to be different from?
Not significantly, within $100 one way or the other,
Right.
but we'll always be able to provide you with an estimate. All we need is basically the purchase price of the property, any payoffs if we know of any, and the commissions, just the general terms of the contract, and we can run quotes to let you know what that title insurance would be. But there's only about 5 companies that issue title insurance across the nation, so they're all going to be pretty close in price, within $100 of one another. I'm kind of referring to more than one policy because we typically issue owner's title insurance as well as lender's title insurance policies. Lender's policy, of course, would protect the lender and their ownership interest in the property in light of the loan that's been given for the buyer to be able to purchase the property. But the owner's policy would protect the owner and their heirs in perpetuity, really as long as they own the property and even beyond that, because once you own a property, you're always in the chain of title. So if someone were to bring a lawsuit against everyone that's owned 123 Main Street, you're suing probably the last 5 owners until you can figure out really where the issue took place.
Wow.
So that title insurance will protect you. Will protect you in perpetuity, just like a car insurance or life insurance policy would protect you for the period in which you were using their insurance coverage. So
Interesting.
even if you were to pass away, we talked about the 3 of us owning a property. If all 3 of us were to pass, it would protect our heirs. Whoever was going to receive that property would still be protected under that owner's title insurance policy. So definitely something important to purchase. It's usually just the one-time fee at the time of settlement. It's not a monthly fee like auto, life, health insurance, anything like that.
Even mortgage insurance, right?
Right.
Exactly.
And that's
So
optional, right?
owner's title insurance is optional. Definitely talk to the attorney or the settlement company you're working with. It is pretty low cost in terms of the amount of coverage that you'd be able to receive. But lenders,
I'll put it this way, man. Like when I have a contract, right? If knowing that owners is optional, right? Sometimes you get some people that are like, well, I don't want that. And if they're that adamant about it, I make them sign a form that we've advised it's in their best interest to get it, and that they're choosing not to, and they hold me and my company harmless from any ill effects that come of that.
Yeah,
I mean, you think about it like $1,300 sometimes, right? $1,400. I mean, on the higher side, depending on the price of the property, obviously, right?
Sure.
For some protection for as long as you own the property and beyond, it's a no-brainer. Yeah.
and I always tell people too, so the lenders, every institutional lender will require that we issue a lender's title insurance policy, and for them, they won't waive it.
Oh, wow.
So I think that speaks volumes about the importance that the banks feel this title insurance policy has. Otherwise, they wouldn't be buying it. So
If it's important enough for the lender to require it, why would it not be important enough for you to get it as an
Absolutely.
option? Right?
right.
Absolutely.
So I send you a contract, right? And I represent the buyer, right? I send you my contract. Who do you represent?
We essentially represent the transaction. That's the easiest way to describe it to every individual. We don't represent the buyer. We don't represent the seller. Our goal is just to make sure that clean and clear title is being transferred to the buyer. So unfortunately, we're limited in the legal advice that we can provide to a buyer and in the legal advice we can provide to the seller. We don't give out any legal advice. We just make sure that everyone's getting to the end goal and that title is clean, clear. All judgments have been cleared, so we can ensure the transaction for both the purchaser, who has retained MBH, who it has selected the title company, as well as the lender that's providing their funds so that we can complete the transaction.
But at the end of that, you're interpreting the contract. You're not doing what the buyer wants. You're not doing what the seller wants, right?
Absolutely.
And I bring that up, right? I've seen a lot of times where, we're writing an offer and it's seller prefers, XYZ title, right? Well, in the state, the buyer gets the right to choose depending on the temperature of the market. It may be in the buyer's best interest to just go along with it so they can get the deal. It's important to bring that up because I think they need to know that the attorney doesn't represent the seller, even though the listing agent or the seller says seller prefers. That attorney still represents the document, right? They represent the transaction, as you put it. They don't represent either party. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Let's see. I had a question. Oh, just like with anything, right? There are always some red flags, right? So what are you seeing? Obviously, just because you work for MBH, I strongly believe that MBH is a reputable company.
Right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. I know that for a fact. That said, what should people be looking for, or what are some of the red flags that people should be looking out for when it comes to settlement and titles and stuff like that?
I think it's definitely important to do your research. The agents that you're working with or the professionals you know in the industry know which title companies can get it done. There are certain companies out there that can't close within the promised time frames, which is really important in this market because it's harder and harder to get an extension on a contract. I think it also hinges on being responsive. I think there's a lot of title insurance companies and title companies out there that are not as responsive to the buyers and the sellers, and everyone just wants to feel comfortable that the transaction's moving forward and that, you know, we are going to close on time. I think one thing that's about MBH that's important is, you know, we're big enough to care, or we're big enough to matter in the industry, but we're small enough to still care and provide that face-to-face interaction. So, you know, we're definitely there. We have 22 offices in this DC metropolitan area. So there's a lot of attorneys on the ground. There, sometimes when you're working with a bigger company, and I don't need to name them, but they're frequently on the radio advertising super low interest rates for loans. But it's not necessarily the best companies out there to work with because they have such high volume that they're not really concerned on the ground level if one contract does not close.
Right.
But if you're working with a local company like MBH or like a local loan officer, you know, we're the ones at the table. We're the ones making sure that you're a new member of our community, right?
Yeah.
If I'm closing a transaction in my neighborhood, I want to make sure that my neighbor is in that neighborhood. I want to make sure that everyone's satisfied with the transaction. No one wants to have a bad reputation in the community. So I would definitely advise people not only to look at the cost, but look at the services that they're going to be receiving.
Yeah.
The cost, it's so interesting you mentioned the cost, right? Because I find that for the most part, the cost for settlement services is so comparable from company to company, right? I mean, we were talking about the cost for title insurance, but also the cost for the services that you provide to do all of that work that you're doing on that back end.
Right.
From company to company, it's if there's a difference, it's very, very minimal, right? So it really does, to your point, it comes down to service. It comes down to, you know, the comfort level of the people that are going to be sitting at the table. I tell people all the time, you can go use whoever you want, right? But the reason we make recommendations is because we've built relationships with these people, right? If you're some random person and that service provider does a terrible job, you're one person. But if they do a terrible job for one of my clients, that's 25 plus transactions a year that they no longer ever get, right? So it makes more of a difference.
Absolutely.
So spot on.
Yeah.
Even don't purchase a $700,000 home and try to save $100.
Yeah, really.
Because it's not going to come out. You're not going to come out ahead.
Or $300,000 or $200,000 home for that matter.
Exactly.
You know,
sometimes I get it. It's a big investment. It's nerve-wracking even when I purchased my own home, signing those documents because it's a significant investment. But there are certain things you should not skimp on. And I think you can rely on your local, you know, professionals in the industry to point you in the right direction about who can get it done, who's reputable, and who will make sure it's done right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. Shifting gears real quick, let's talk about your own firm. So let's talk about what you guys do. Tell us your story.
My husband and I own our own law firm, Stepanuk Law Group. So we handle a little bit of everything. We do estate planning, we do real estate matters, we do separation agreements, prenups. So anything you can think of on the ground level, we're happy to assist with. One thing that I can do through the law firm that MBH does not handle is deeds. So if you're thinking about long-term planning and you'd like to add a spouse or add a friend or a family member to your deed, that would all go through Stepanuk Law Group. MBH Settlement Group is just that intermediary. It's just that company that's making sure clean and clear title is being transferred. So they're not preparing or providing any legal documents. You would have to retain an attorney, but that's the great thing that I can offer. Because
is that typical for title companies?
So every title company probably has at least one attorney on staff. Some of the title companies only have one attorney on staff.
I never knew that. I never knew that it was. That's crazy.
It's just a matter of logistics, and the good title companies, you would never know, right? We run smoothly, so we handle the behind the scenes, dotting our I's, crossing our T's to make sure it doesn't feel any different to the people who are receiving the services. But we are making sure behind the scenes we're in compliance with state, local, federal regulations in terms of that. But that's another thing that sets MBH apart. We have 15 attorneys on staff, and so we have plenty of attorneys on site for all of our locations. And sometimes if you're dealing with a bigger company, think of the ones that are advertising on the radio that provide national services. They maybe have one attorney per jurisdiction, maybe. And there are some, and maybe it's just an attorney who's located in Illinois that has a Maryland license or was able to waive in under one of the exceptions. So they may not even be familiar with Maryland law. And so that's another reason to pick a company that's really been around. MBH has been around for 28 years. So we definitely have lengthy experience, not only in the laws, but kind of just in the local customary practices to make sure that everyone's receiving the best services. But as Gus mentioned, happy to help on the legal side as well with preparing documents, wills, trusts, LLC documents, getting your LLCs, corporations, companies registered with the state. And that's where we help on the front side of the transaction. MBH, if you envision it, is contracts as soon as we get a contract all the way to when you get the keys at the settlement table. So the law firms can assist, one, in providing that title, making sure that legal document's prepared so you're ready at the settlement table, but also before the transaction. So a lot of times Stepanuk Law Group is assisting individuals prior to the transaction, making sure either if they have an estate, that the estate has been properly opened with the local county, that they've obtained an EIN and probably a bank account for the estate, depending on the estate. In Maryland, if an estate, someone has passed away, is selling the property, we distribute the funds to the estate account because then it has to be properly administered with the local county. You actually have to have the courts sign off on the distribution of funds. So we can't provide the funds directly in Maryland to an individual.
Right.
So just making sure that everything up front, and that's where we help a lot of our agent partners. If you think you may be going under contract soon or you're going to be signing a listing or agreement with an individual, come to us first if you think there's anything unique about the transaction. Bankruptcy filings, trusts, estates selling a property, divorce cases are usually the big red flags of what we're looking for to make sure all the ducks are a row even before you go under contract. Because as we indicated, even in this industry, 30 to 45 days is not a whole lot of time if you need the cooperation of the IRS or even the local court system to make sure you're complying. And in some transactions, especially if you're closing under 30 days, every day makes a difference. So it's helpful when we do hear from our agent partners in advance of the transaction. They feel more comfortable representing that individual, that the settlement is going to go through. Everyone wants to have a good reputation in the industry. No one wants to be the agent whose deals are falling through.
I've met a few of those.
They need a better title partner.
For sure.
So we can assist them to make sure everything is in a row prior to actually going under contract.
Yeah, I love it.
There's so much.
On and on and on and on.
The domino effect.
You will forget more about law than I will ever even think about remembering.
I'm telling you,
unbelievable.
I can't even think about it. So much information.
It's
How do you retain it?
Don't ask me anything about kitchen cabinets or anything about what you
Fair
do.
enough.
I guess that's fair, right? Everybody's
enough.
got their area of expertise, right?
Let's talk countertops for a second.
You were just showing me that kitchen. I didn't even notice that the sides were different.
Right? I mean,
so that's not my area of expertise. We all have our areas, but that's why
totally
we make such a
understandable.
great team, because people like Gus know the best of the best in the industry. People like David know the best of the best in the industry. We don't have to know all these different fields.
For sure.
Right.
But we're able to refer out to the other local companies, local service businesses that are the best in the area and can be confident about those referrals. So when you have Gus, when you hire David, when you hire my company, you have the weight of the community behind you.
100%.
I like it. I don't think I've ever heard it put quite like that.
Right?
It's a lot of pressure, Kim. That's
Seriously.
I mean,
But it's a team.
Should we
It is a
walk
team.
that back a little bit, maybe?
No.
It is a team. It is a team.
No
for
doubt.
Sure.
100%.
All right. Did you want to add anything else before we close this?
I think that's it. If you think of anything else, if you're working with David
I
or Gus.
get a feeling we're gonna do this again.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Oh, I guarantee it.
Talking different topics though.
Guarantee it. So with that, one of the things that we ask of our guests is if somebody had a question for you, aside from dropping a comment, obviously, how can they get in touch with you?
You can send me an email or call my cell phone, 703-627-4371. That's one thing. I'll always give out my cell phone number.
I was gonna say you just gave out your cell phone number.
That's okay.
It's all over
Nights
YouTube.
and weekends. My work.
It's all over
I'm just
YouTube.
saying.
My work life integration.
There you go.
There.
Her work balance, right?
Work balance.
What about that email address?
You can reach me at Kim at Stepanuk Law, so KIM at Stepanuk, STEPANUK Law LAW.com or KSTEPANUK at MBH.com. Either one will help.
If you didn't catch those, they're going to be down in the description
For
below.
sure.
So you can just click it and you'll be able to email without making any typos. Because that's a lot of letters, and I can't keep
Lots
up.
of letters.
That said, if you found any value in this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to know more about what we discuss, again, you like the topics we're discussing, feel free to subscribe. If you don't, that's okay
Subscribe
too.
anyway. Subscribe anyway. It's fine. Subscribe.
And again, if you're benefiting from it, tell your friends, tell your family members, tell your coworkers. Maybe they'll benefit as well.
Sure.
So
Join the community.
absolutely.
Bingo.
Join the community. We try to keep it local too. So that said, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.
So then.